Good morning, everyone. We're going to get started here in just a moment. At the end, we are going to try to take some questions, so please use the chat feature. And we will get to as many of those as we can. We're going to give just a few more people a chance to get in, and then we'll get started. Okay, we're at almost 300 now. We should have about 500 plus members joining us today, Dr. Yoon. Good morning, my name is Tessa Holtz and I am the CEO for the Long Island Board of Realtors, and I get the great honor and privilege of introducing Dr. Lawrence Yoon to you this morning. He is the Chief Economist and Senior Vice President of Research for NAR. He is, I tried to trim down his bio. It is not easy. This is all very important. He received his undergraduate degree from Purdue University and earned his PhD from the University of Maryland in College Park. He oversees and is responsible for a wide range of research activity for the association, including NAR's existing home sales statistics, the Affordability Index, and the Buyers and Sellers Profile Report. He creates forecasts and participates in many economic forecasting panels, among them the Blue Chip Council and the Wall Street Journal Forecasting Survey. He appears regularly on financial news outlets, is a frequent speaker at real estate conferences throughout the United States, and has testified before Congress. He also participates in the Industrial Economist Discussion Group and the Joint Center for Housing Studies of Harvard University. He has appeared as a guest on C-SPAN's Washington Journal, and we are excited and very privileged to have him appearing right here with the Long Island Board of Realtors today to give us an idea of what to expect coming up as we come out of the COVID crisis. Welcome, Dr. Yoon.
Good morning, Tessa, and good morning, Realtors of Long Island. I want to give thank you to Matthew Arnold, the local association president, for also arranging this meeting. It's been a tough time, certainly a unique period in US history to undergo this pandemic, the economic lockdown, and certainly the New York City area undergoing this essentially the ground zero impact of the coronavirus. Thankfully, at least health-wise, the coronavirus new cases appears to be measurably declining. So hopefully this trend can continue and everyone can steadily return to work as the economy steadily reopens. So I want to share with you what I have been observing as well as what you can anticipate. So let me try to put my PowerPoint here on the screen. So hold one second. All right, so here we are. So the broadest measure of the economy is something called the GDP. And you can see that mostly it's been positive. 2009 was the Great Recession. If you remember the foreclosure crisis, the prices plunging, terrible times, but we have since come out of that. This time last year in 2019, we had a fellow New Yorker speak to the realtor audience here in Washington, D.C. President Donald Trump, because we always invite the sitting presidents to address the realtor audience in person. We have roughly 8,000 realtors who come to Washington to advocate, talk to members of their Congress about real estate issues, and President Trump accepted our invitation. Now, President Trump is known for possible exaggeration on some of his comments, but he ran up some of the economic numbers, and those were pretty much right on point. All-time high in stock prices at that time, the record low unemployment rate across all demographic groups, and the GDP running very strongly. And 2020, at least the beginning of it, before the pandemic, looks like another expansion year, 10 straight years of economic expansion. But then we hit a pandemic, and 2020 will be quite ugly. In fact, the first quarter number came out, which showed a minus 4.8%. By any historical standard, that is a sharp decline, but that will be quite modest decline compared to the second quarter GDP, which is not yet out, but it's been tallied up, and it could be even minus 30%. So quite a hit to the economy. But if we look at the first quarter numbers, something interesting is happening. The broad economy contracted because consumer spending declined by 8%, business spending declined by 9%. But look at the next line, residential investment, which comprised home sales, home building, and spending for home remodeling activity. And it actually was a 21% higher figure, implying that the housing market was quite strong before the pandemic. Now, the commercial real estate was actually somewhat softer condition. So we know about all the retail shops that is closed during the economic lockdown, terrible situation. But even before the pandemic, things were not necessarily at the maximum occupancy in the commercial real estate. The federal and state government spending were they were doing what it was, just spending modestly higher in the first quarter. But the next two lines are very interesting. Personal income was actually higher in the first quarter versus 1 year before, yet spending declined. So people have more income, yet they are spending less in the first quarter. So the personal savings rate actually grew by 152%. So a way to visualize is that, say, someone who was saving $200 each month, now they were saving $350, so I guess more than 400, more than that in terms of savings. So the pandemic brought about people saving more money. Now, if the savings turns into spending once the economy reopens, that is a very positive sign for economic growth. But if the savings are being done because people are pessimistic or uncertain about future outlook and continue to save, that will hold back some of the economic growth potential in the second half of the year. Second quarter number, again, is not yet out, but once it is out, it will be quite an ugly figure in the second quarter before turning positive in the third and fourth quarter. If we look at the job situation, over 20 million job losses in the month of April. Most of the job losses, close to 7.6 million job losses in the leisure and hospitality, essentially hotel, tourism, say Disney out in Florida, they're completely shut down. So a large decline in jobs. But the second line is interesting. Education and healthcare sector declined by 2.5 million. Now that job should turn positive as the economy reopens. If you think about, say, the demand for daycare centers, I think those would be very strong. How will they handle the social distancing? That will be quite tricky, but also the healthcare. Many nurses and doctors were laid off, believe it or not, or say the office administrator at dental offices, because so much focus was on just the COVID-19 and trying to get that set up, that other healthcare industry, there was a pause button. So people who needed hip surgery, they could not get that done, knee replacement, they could not get that done. But we know that there are people lined up to get those surgeries. So as soon as the economy reopens, the job losses in the healthcare sector should turn positive immediately. And also retail sector, a lot of restaurants shut down. But now it is not 100% shutdown, which was the case a few weeks into the coronavirus, but down about 60% as people are feeling more comfortable with takeout orders. So it's not necessarily matching up with last year's figures, but it's no longer 100% decline. It's only about 60% decline for the restaurants because takeout orders are occurring, and you see the other industry that are impacted. We had Secretary of Labor Eugene Scalia speak to the Realtor audience last week at the National Realtor meetings, and he believed that 80% of the job losses will come back in the second half of the year because that was considered temporary furlough. And as soon as the state economies reopen, the jobs should be returning. This is the job picture for the Nassau County, Suffolk County, before the pandemic, or at least to March of 2020, up to the March of 2020. The pandemic shutdown occurred from the mid-March, but you can see the job creation that was occurring throughout. From year 2000 to the pre-pandemic period, one is looking at almost 150,000 job addition. And that was the source of the housing demand, why people were wanting to buy a home because of the steady job gains. But of course, now we are in a sharp job decline. And the question is, in the second half, how much of the job losses will come back in the second half of the year? I'm also monitoring very closely the timely weekly information on people who are filing for unemployment insurance. So this is the figure for the Nassau, Suffolk counties. So you see that pre-pandemic, there were roughly only about 5,000 people filing for unemployment insurance for the very first time. Then in late March, you see the huge run up, 50,000, then rising up to 60,000. But in recent weeks, it's much lower. So at least it's hinting that the number of new cases of people filing for unemployment insurance is beginning to fall. Total cases are still rising because all these new cases we need to add up as to how many people are receiving unemployment or pandemic relief check. NAR lobbied aggressively during this stimulus discussion in Congress to say that realtors were working hard at work before the pandemic, and because of the government-imposed lockdown, the independent contractors should not suffer financially. So everyone should tap into the financial resources that is available through this unemployment insurance, pandemic relief, until the economy reopens, because this is not the fault of your own. It's the government-imposed business disruption, and people should tap into these resources until things begin to reopen. So we lobbied hard, and hopefully you are able to tap into these resources. And furthermore, for brokerages, the small business loans, which often do not have to be paid back if you meet certain criteria. Again, another thing that NAR lobbied aggressively to assure that the financial impact will be very minimal during this lockdown. When we look at the amount in the unemployment insurance, I think you have heard probably in some news media that it is quite generous because of the $600 addition to the normal unemployment check. And we ran some numbers across the states. And what we are finding is that in some states, on average, person who is receiving unemployment check, it is higher than the wage they were receiving while working. Say a cashier working at a department store like Macy's, they were earning certain wage rate. Now the unemployment check is actually a little higher, but not always. If we hone into the state of New York, in general, New Yorkers are off about $100 worse off compared to the wages they were earning before the lockdown. So even though we are trying to replace the lost income, not all of the lost income is occurring in the New York State. They're down about $100 per week on average in the New York State. But still tap into the resources, at least during this business disruption, you can at least have some level of financial support. I would like to also point towards two metro markets. One is New Orleans, second one, New York City. Let's go to New Orleans first. Now, current pandemic, there's no similarity with anything in the past, other than the Spanish pandemic, 100 years ago when about 20 or 30 million people died worldwide. I'm not sure how they operated with so much, we don't have the internet, vaccine discovery, all that part. But the recent disaster of New Orleans, where there was a Hurricane Katrina, you can see the unemployment rate sharply rising from 5% to 16%. But note how fast it declined once New Orleans reopened their economy. And also massive disaster relief funding went into the city. And the home prices actually began to rise in New Orleans the subsequent years. So there was a quite quick recovery in New Orleans when the economy reopened. But you can't say that flood is completely different from the fear of the coronavirus. So if we look at the New York City, September 11, 2001, that horrific events, unemployment rate increased from 4% to 7%. And then it lingered at that high unemployment rate for about a couple of years before going down again, even though massive disaster relief funding went into the city. Because you eat at a restaurant and given what occurred, that you don't know whether a bomb is planted in the restaurant or not. So the fear factor actually held back some of the growth potential for a while before it eventually went back down to 4% unemployment rate. And then it blew up the second time, not related to any disaster, but just the subprime loans blowing up and the Lehman Brothers collapsing, foreclosure crisis. So that was more of a bad economic events that led to the high unemployment rate. And then steadily over the 10 years, unemployment rate went back down. Just to illustrate that once the economy reopens, if there is a vaccine discovery, we may have something similar to like the New Orleans case. If we don't have the vaccine, we have to do social distancing and people are still fearful of not going outside, then it may take a little longer to recover. Now, for the Federal Reserve, the monetary policy, they are all in. And Jay Powell, the chairman, gave an interview at 60 Minutes last night, essentially saying that they will do everything to support the economy. So fundamentally, new policy of going in a total maximum and using every weapon possible, and still to say that they are not running out of bullets. They still have plenty of weapons left to attack it. But for the real estate, what is important is the blue line, the mortgage rates. 30-year fixed rate mortgages are at all-time low, 3.3% average. I mean, those are amazingly low mortgage rates. The orange line that you see is the 10-year treasury, because what we know in the past is that there is a relationship between 10-year treasury and the mortgage rate. They move almost similarly. So what this chart shows is that at the very last data point, 10-year treasury is less than 1%, which means that mortgage rate actually should be about 2.7%. So it is possible over the next month or so, the mortgage rate may go under 3%. Possibility, not a guarantee, but the one mortgage that is not currently working is any mortgages that cannot be sold to Fannie and Freddie. For the consumers that don't know what Fannie and Freddie is, but the mortgage underwriters know that whether or not the mortgages can be sold to Fannie and Freddie. And if it can be sold to Fannie and Freddie, 5% down payment or 3.5% down payment, those are still running. The credit scores as what it was before the pandemic, but jumbo mortgages cannot be sold to Fannie and Freddie, and it is not working. So someone who wants to buy $1 million home in Hamptons, and they don't have the adequate down payment, it has to be jumbo mortgages. It's going to be very hard to obtain because only the Fannie and Freddie backed mortgages and FHA government-backed mortgages are working. But if it cannot be sold to the government, it is not functioning. And we will see whether or not Federal Reserve steps in to help the jumbo market or not, but they could easily do so. But the mortgage rate decline possibility is clearly there. Before the pandemic, we had a low inventory. And I think many of you who are working with the first-time buyers before the pandemic knew it was quite a difficult time to buy a home because of lack of inventory. Well, what has happened during the pandemic? There is even fewer inventory. So we had a housing shortage on the mid-price and below. On the upper end market, there was plentiful inventory and the prices were actually flat in the upper end or maybe a slight reduction on the luxury properties. But on the low end, there was multiple bidding was quite prevalent. And now there is even fewer inventory. So what this tells is that once the economy reopens and listings begin to pop out, those homes that are mid-price or below, you may continue to attract plentiful buyers. Now, some of you may say, what about the unemployment rate? But keep in mind that there is an income support for those people who are currently unemployed, income support. And furthermore, 70% of American workers would have secure employment. So they are just facing this historically low mortgage rates. They just need to see more inventory choices before deciding. And home sales, again, before the pandemic, it was strong, but the data for March was already, let me see, the data for March pending contract was down, and I think the data for April will be down even more, but we are beginning to sense some recovery occurring in the month of May. Right now, we are in the middle of May. The official numbers are not yet out, but as I am seeing some weekly numbers from various multiple listing services, as more listings are popping out, those listings are not lingering in the market. It has been being picked up by the buyers quickly. So there is a buyer demand out there. We just need more inventory to show up into the marketplace. And this is the data from the Mortgage Bankers Association looking at mortgage application to buy a home. And it was positive before the pandemic, meaning higher compared to 1 year before. Then it turned quickly negative during the economic lockdown. But note what's happening in the month of May, that it is still below 1 year ago, but not as severely, possibly hinting that the worst is over and soon it may actually turn positive, meaning that we may have higher activity in, say, June compared to June of last year. So let's hope that is the case, but also let's hope that as the economy reopens, it is done safely, so we don't face the second wave of pandemic and second lockdown, which will completely kill the economy and the housing market recovery potential. So let's all observe the social distancing so we don't have the spreading of the virus. Now, the inventory, there is no indication that there will be any flooding of new inventory coming onto the market. Because we have had a housing shortage, builders inadequately building compared to what is needed. The orange line would be the historical average, but America has been underproducing for almost a decade, and this housing shortage cannot be suddenly balanced out in a 1 year or 2 year time. So I expect continued housing shortage over the next couple of years, but only on the mid-price and below. Plentiful inventory on the luxury end, but the mid-price and below housing shortage, and you have to price it right, so one cannot be too greedy from home sellers' perspective, but there is a plentiful demand, especially with low mortgage rates. How is the government funding all this unemployment insurance check, massive stimulus bill? It is by running up this huge budget deficit, off the chart budget deficit. But who is buying this debt? Is it the Chinese government? Is it the German mutual fund? Who is buying this debt? Right now, it is Federal Reserve printing money to buy this debt. So you can say, in essence, all this unemployment check, stimulus money is coming from printed money. And if you remember from Econ 101 textbook, or just your common sense, if you print money, are we going to have high inflation? What certainly happened in the former Soviet republics when the Soviet Union broke down, they printed money, high inflation. Venezuela, they printed money, hyperinflation. So what about in the US? US is very fortunate to have the US dollar. You can go any country, whether Indonesia, Mexico, Finland, and say, I would like to get a haircut, and here's $20. And they would easily accept a $20 bill. Because US dollar has maintained that credibility, and therefore, even if we print money, we don't have to have inflation, or at least not in the short term. So I don't expect any inflation over this year or next year, but say 4 or 5 years from now, we may begin to have inflation. What does that mean? That means the rents will be higher, food prices will be higher, people's income may be rising, even though their standard of living is not rising because everything is more expensive. But one thing that will not be rising in the future is the mortgage payment for someone who bought a home this year or next year. So you grab onto those 3% mortgage rate, your monthly payment is completely fixed over the next 30 years, theoretically. Every prices will be rising, including real estate value. Real estate is a good hedge against inflation. It rises with inflation. but the monthly payment would not. So I think that's something for the consumers to consider and something that you may want to send this message over to the consumers. And when I say higher inflation 4 or 5 years from now, I am not looking at 1970 style 10% inflation, but maybe say 5, 6% inflation, higher than normal of say 2 or 3%, but a little higher than normal because of so much printing of the money. So my outlook is the following. So 2018, 2019, nationwide, we had more than 5 million home sales. First quarter was actually running better than that. But the second quarter will be the lowest quarter, down about 40%. I mean, this is my forecast. It's going to be a little bit off, but that's rough estimate of what I anticipate. Nationwide, I think the Long Island region will follow similar patterns. Look at the fourth quarter, still negative from 1 year before, but not as much. So over this whole period, what it means is that for 2020, GDP will be down. There will be net job losses. Home prices roughly stable because of the housing shortage, but the home sales will be down about 10 to 15% in 2020. Then 2021 should be all positive, assuming that we don't have the second wave of the pandemic. Maybe a vaccine is already discovered. So everything will be running positive, positive home prices, positive home sales. So just hang in there, and I think you will come out fine. Some of the permanent change I anticipate after the pandemic is that maybe open houses with so many people entering, maybe that is the end of it. It's always a private appointment. The virtual office meeting will continue to take place even with the vaccine discovery. I have been holding the Zoom meetings here and there, and I think people are becoming more comfortable, which means more employers will offer that opportunity. And if that is the case, people do not need to live close to New York City Center, Manhattan. So they can live in Long Island, longer commute because they don't have to go into office every single day. And you may see more people demand larger houses, maybe dedicated office space. So I think Long Island could actually come out a little better compared to the city environment after the pandemic over the next few years as more people do the remote work possibility. So those are my quick summary of what you can anticipate. And of course, I don't have a perfect crystal ball as exactly what will happen, but based on the housing shortage, which will not be relieved, historically low mortgage rates, job market is terrible, but there is an income support, and there will be some job recovery occurring in the second half of the year. So let me stop sharing, and then So anyway, thank you for listening. Thank you, Tessa, again, for inviting me, and President Matthew Arnold for bringing me on. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Yoon. I'm Mary Ann, the Education Director for LIBOR. I know that you had said you'd take a few questions, so if anybody has any questions other than excellent, thank you, we're honored, excellent. That's what the chat is filled with. We wanted to, I still don't see any questions. We wanted to thank you so much. We had no idea that you would do so much homework to make it so specific to the Long Island market. We greatly appreciate that, and you've been so gracious to also share your slides with us. A lot of people are asking that. Great information, and we do have one question. Any information about commercial ratio and commercial properties? And how that
yes, so commercial market is more difficult because on the residential side, which I cover in detail, mortgage rate is the magic that really stimulates the market. And even after the September 11th event, housing market actually got boost because mortgage rate fell after the September 11th event, and people respond to the lower mortgage rates. Now on the commercial real estate, it's about the job situation and the occupancy, and certainly all the small business being shut down, the retail sector, which was already running sort of sideways before the pandemic, is now devastated. Shopping mall absolutely crushed with major department stores declaring bankruptcy. I anticipate the overall commercial real estate prices to be down about 10% this year. So I anticipate price decline because rental income is not coming in. Only the industrial property, warehousing, those are solid. But the apartment situation is, I'm a little uncertain because of the, some people are delayed on rental payment and whether or not they can eventually catch up or in that case. But going into the future, I think for smart commercial real estate practitioner, you should begin to think about those emptying shopping malls, especially indoor malls, and turn it into a healthcare armory. So when we do have a next pandemic at some point in the future, we have the ventilator production facility already there, producing the mask, maybe some room set aside for hospital bed. So like a healthcare armory, just in case there is a next pandemic. So rather than demolishing that shopping mall, which by the way, should be in a very strategically important area where it's easy access to many homes, use that as a potential healthcare armory. Because next round of stimulus bill should include infrastructure spending, and if some portion of the money can be to enhance this healthcare armory, maybe some commercial developer can talk with the mayor, city council to see what can be arranged.
Sure, especially in the city. Let's see, how about the luxury homes, the $3 to $5 million market? I know you touched on that briefly, but maybe just another few.
So on the luxury market, I was somewhat pessimistic 1 month ago because stock market had crashed. For the luxury market, many people are on the upper end. They have large holding in the stock market. I'm quite surprised today with the stock market gains that is occurring. I believe NASDAQ is actually higher today compared to 1 year ago. So quite an amazing feat. So somehow the people who are betting the money believe we're going to have quite a sharp economic recovery in the second half of the year, or the vaccine will be discovered. So I'm beginning to feel more comfortable about the luxury end, but because of the SALT, state and local income tax limits, that will make it very burdensome to hold on to those expensive property. And we saw some major price reduction in Greenwich, Connecticut, Northern Jersey, and I'm sure in the Hamptons area. So it's a balance between whether the stock market recovery boosts some of the wealth on the upper end, so they want to buy homes, but that trend post-pandemic, which is people working remotely more often, and therefore they said, well, why don't I just have a home out in Long Island rather than property out in Manhattan? So we may begin to see that dynamics at play in the coming years. One final question, if there is.
Sure, we're hearing that comment on the news as well. People heading out east for more space, more property, and from the city. Let's see. Those businesses that have failed and job loss for the long run, how will that affect the demand for purchasing homes and apartments in a greater demand due to lower prices?
People who are losing jobs, those people in hospitality sector, the restaurant business, and again, they are getting some income support, so that's a good thing. But the prospect, and it saddens me that some of the great restaurants may be shut down permanently. And those are terrible because you have attachment to that restaurant. But we should also keep in mind that we always have set of entrepreneurs. So whatever restaurant that is shut down, one can always envision that there will be a new set of owners 1 year from now opening a different restaurant. I mean, we hate to see the current good restaurant go under, but the dynamics will be at play. Hopefully, with the vaccine discovery, people can sit down normal, even without social distancing, if we have the vaccine. Maybe I've lost the question now.
Oh, no. No, you were saying about the restaurants, and the
Oh yeah, people coming back. So the Labor Department really believes that 80% of the people who lost jobs will come back. And if you think about like dental offices who are shut down for a couple of months, surely people need dental care once the economy reopens. Daycare centers, I think will reopen. We have to monitor what's happening in Europe. There are some medical studies, I'm not a medical expert, to say that Children, we know, they don't get, they're not impacted by COVID, but they are trying to see whether it can be transmitted from children to adults. So if that is very minimal, then maybe the school system can open safely.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of job losses currently, which may come back quite strongly quickly. But the cruise ship industry, it may take 3-4 years to come back.
We've had other speakers. They speak about the V recovery, and everything that you showed us and in your PowerPoint kind of confirms all of that. Very specific, very optimistic, and we want to thank you from the Long Island Board of Realtors for your time and for all the work that you did to make it so close to home. Thank you.
Thank you, Marianne, and thank you everyone for having me.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.